Welcome to the Erdos podcast, where we spend our non-productive time talking about everything drilling tech and getting the latest industry insight from leaders on our show. I'm Ken Miller.
And I'm David Erdos.
And today we brought on an industry leader and a good friend from Total Directional, Mr. Brad Barevich. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. How's it going?
I'm doing okay. I think today's a pretty good Friday, right?
Yeah, Fridays are always good.
It's not quite noon yet, so I can't religiously check the rig count just yet. Because I think Baker Hughes updates it at noon, but I think we were +3 last week, and then I think we've had a pretty good run of just inching back up, except for I think 2 weeks ago we lost a couple rigs, but then we're back up 2 or 3, so that's good, right?
Yeah, more rigs the better.
I could not agree more, right? Like I look back, on 2014 when we had like 1,800, 1,900 rigs running, and I just like that would be so nice. There's just there used to be so many more rigs.
Yeah.
So, Brad, I'd love to hear how you kind of what your path has been, right? I think it's really important for others out there that are trying to make their way through their careers and their journey in the industry. It's always good to have kind of data points from others who have succeeded in the industry and like how they've come about and how they got to where they are, right? And so can you tell us a little bit about like kind of how you got started in the industry and maybe a little bit about your education and that kind of stuff, right?
Sure, yeah. So as you said, work for Total Directional. We're a service company in Colorado, and we work all over, down in the Permian Basin, up in the Williston Basin, kind of all over the U.S. So I was born and raised in Canada. Alberta was big into the oil and gas scene, still is. I mean, technically right now, not so much, but so I wanted to get into the schooling part of it, went to college. I took actually geology and geophysics was what I got into. Coming out of school, it's not that jobs were readily available for that kind of thing. So I just got onto, an oil and gas service company and learned my way working with tools, servicing, maintenance, R&M stuff. And, for me, it was more satisfying working hands-on with the tools, being more mechanical with it, finding new ways, adapting to service procedures that were, I wouldn't say old, but, that someone made up. There's always room for improvement on these service procedures and everything like that. So that's where I thought I could excel and, improve upon other people's stuff.
I would definitely say that entering the industry as a young person, I had this idea that any amount of process was evil and a waste, and I could not have been more dead wrong.
Right.
And so that was a huge, learning experience for me, and I definitely would like it's a lot of, financial dollars thrown away. So where did you go to school?
So I went to school at SAIT, it's called, so the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. And I
Great.
took,
It's kind of an interesting entry that you came with. That's really cool that you came with the geology or geophysics background. Have you found that to be helpful or give you more insight into drilling and MWD?
I mean, honestly, I probably forgot more than I learned from that. But it helped me, be more excited about that kind of stuff. Or, when you hear people talking about geology or, where they want to go for exploration.
2, 1. So I wish I had a geology degree because I feel like I've had to learn a lot of that stuff the hard way because I started off with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And so, I went into school with the kids that were working on art and advertisements and Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, believe it or not. And it was the weirdest thing for me because like I had a day job at TI, and like at TI I was working on software and circuit boards, and then I'd go to school and I'm like making art. It's just like, okay, this is a weird disconnect. Like, there's something that doesn't really quite fit here, right? And I guess that the guys at TI eventually turned me on to all the technology, and that kind of really taught me all of the about my passion for actual engineering, right? But Dave, so one of the most interesting thing for us with geology has been the gamma detectors, right? So we've had to learn a lot about the geology to be able to build a successful gamma detector. And I love what's the joke we call it, like a banana detector.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a cabinet at
Brad,
the office, a banana detector once, where we stored gamma parts.
yeah, Brad, did you know that the bananas are slightly radioactive?
I have heard.
Small
So
amounts of potassium.
yeah. So a little bit of potassium there, and they are about as radioactive as the formation that we're trying to pick up on, right?
So we'll just have a bunch of bananas in our shop, and we'll do
Well,
the calculation of rock.
I think we should do the gamma calibration. We should do a giant pile of bananas, and you move the gamma probe in and out of a giant pile of bananas.
That would be hilarious.
I like it.
So Brad, have you always worked with Total, or were you with other service companies before that?
No, I worked with a couple different service companies in Canada, and then moved down to Colorado about almost 6 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked with the guys at Total for about 8 years, and
Gotcha.
moved down to Colorado about 5.5 years ago, and been working with them since.
And has it always been, in service related to, MWD technology, or have you worked in other kind of areas of service companies in the industry?
No, it's always kind of been MWD. I mean, when I first started, I was working on the old GeoLink tools, the negative pulse tools from the UK and stuff like that. So
Oh, that is
definitely different, definitely sort of some old school stuff, but learning the new ways and new technology that people have, it broadens my horizon for sure on what's coming, what's better, what works better.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because like I came into the industry, I think, after those tools were kind of sunset, and I've always been so curious about them. Can you tell me, like, what are some of the biggest, most interesting differences between like a negative pulse tool and the more positive pulse tools that we use now?
So, I mean, the negative pulse tools, used, it was a lot more machining parts. The body of the pulsar was huge. The, UBHO, I guess it wasn't UBHO, just the standard collar that it was mounted to,
Mm-hmm.
a lot bigger. All the stuff was a lot bigger. Having the positive pulse tool allows, I guess, less wash to happen at the actual transmitter part of the
Mm-hmm. So it's more streamlined, I guess.
Yeah, more streamlined. I mean, I think the machining and everything of the negative pulse tool just cost too much money. I mean, the kits were expensive. The maintenance on them was, it wasn't as, I'd like to be more redundant on our service and checklists on these tools. And it was hard to, gauge or have a efficient checklist going on these negative pulse tools than they are the positive pulse tools.
Was that just because of their like much higher mechanical complexity and size than like a positive pulse tool?
Yeah. They're a lot more complex, and I guess it wasn't as many electrical parts in it. So it was a lot more mechanical. And, if one thing sort of washed out or plugged off or anything like that, you could lose everything and you wouldn't know until it was too late.
How's the reliability?
Yeah, I think the reliability is a lot better in the positive pulse tools.
Okay.
We're able to, communicate a lot better, real time, everything like that. Uses less power.
I've always heard that the occasional test on the rig floor with a positive pulse or the negative pulse tool was always interesting, because it would send giant jets of fluid flying out the side of the collar. Not that you were supposed to do that, but people have certainly told me that it's been done.
Right.
So I remember the first time I saw an MWD tool, I was like, what the heck is that, right? Because they're really, like, they're just big skinny pieces of junk that do nothing on the surface. They're totally useless on the surface. So what was your kind of first reaction to seeing the tools and learning about them?
Yeah. So my first reaction, I kind of went in, people are saying, you're going to start servicing these tools. You got to learn, certain directional modules, gamma sensors, pulsar probes, everything like that. And, I look at a pile of stuff on the floor that all looks exactly the same. And I'm like, well, which one's which? And, they're like, well, you got to know there's more inside than there is on the outside. It's not just a copper beryllium tube that you're going to scratch the surface on, right?
You could totally look at those things from the outside and underestimate the amount of complexity that goes on inside that, that copper beryllium tube, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely crazy. So what is it? I mean, what is it like living on, right there at the edge of the rig with the service companies, right? Like, how hard of a job is that? I mean, is it truly 24/7? You guys ever get a break? Like, what's that like?
I mean, it's truly 24/7. Drilling isn't stopping for, Christmas or COVID or anything really. I mean, it's slowing down, but we have to be ready. We have a big team of people at Total Directional, operations teams, shop teams, lab teams, remote operations team. Between all of our groups at Total Directional, operations, maintenance, technical resources and services and stuff like that. Everyone has their own job, but everyone helps out and everyone crosses over between those, duties and everything like that. So it's a 24-hour job, but everyone's ready, everyone signed up for it, and we all know what our roles are and how we can help and improve it, right?
So I'm curious if you in your experience in the industry have ever come to a scientific or technical theory as to why rig emergencies seem to predominantly happen between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m.
Or on holidays.
Or on holidays.
Yeah, I mean, it is Friday, so I'm expecting something to happen here in the next few hours.
You can't take a break, right?
No, you can't take a break, but it's okay. You learn from all these things, so that's what excites me about it a little bit. I'd hate to be doing something repeatedly over and over and over again and not learn from it.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things I tell my guys as well. It's like, I always want to be taking, further and further steps forward, making all the technology and the products better. But like sometimes things happen and there are just emergencies and we got to fix something on the technology or fix a tool or something. And it's like, okay, guys, when that happens, the most important thing is like, we got to take care of the customer at the end of the day, right? So we got to jump on it, get the solutions, as fast as humanly possible, get a quick fix if you can find the quick fix, make the long fix in the real long term. But what's most important is solving that customer issue as fast as possible, and then taking that step backwards and turning it into a step forwards, right? And so, because anytime we have a failure in the field, it's usually because we didn't anticipate something, like a process wasn't followed, or maybe we didn't design something quite as well as we could have. Maybe there was just something that we couldn't think about during the design process or didn't realize until we got out there in the field and had that experience. But the most important thing is that to kind of transform that accident or that oversight into a better product or better services, right? And I think that goes on at both levels. I mean, with the service company, I mean, your people, your service, your customer service is your service, your company is your service. So I think that you put a lot of investment back into making the overall service better, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Learning from any sort of incident or process inadequacies is what makes us better. I mean, we're just trying to, same as you guys, we're trying to get our customers as happy and get the job done.
Yeah. So you mentioned the remote center earlier, and that kind of made me want to ask you, where do you see the future? Are you kind of in the camp where we're going to go full remote, nobody on the rig? Are you in the camp where people that think there's too much value to having staff on the rig, that full remote doesn't really make economical sense, even though it's quote unquote lower cost, because there's more wrapped up into NPT, et cetera? And don't let me just put you into one of those two camps. I'm just bringing those up for discussion, right?
No, for sure. Yeah, I'm excited about the remote operations that we have and how the industry is going towards that. You're obviously going to need some people at the rigs at all times, but having the human error possibility, be removed in some of it is a lot better in my opinion. I mean, I'd like, guys being able to watch over many different rigs, they can talk together in the operations or the remote ops center. They can, discuss and collaborate with each other. It just makes more sense, in my opinion.
I think it's a good chance to add a lot more consistency, right? And I mean, we continue this debate as an industry, and I think the whole transition is probably moving a bit slower than anyone expected. But I think it's been kind of sped up a bit by COVID. But and there, somebody gave me the argument of the day. It's like, it only takes like 7 or 10 minutes of lost time on a rig to wipe out the savings you had from an extra hand not being there for the day, right? I mean, because you might save, $500, $700, $1,000 on the MWD day rate by not having that extra hand out there. But we're talking about rig time that's easily on the order of $100 a minute is what it could cost to run a rig. And so, I mean, that math kind of makes sense. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not saying that some of the, field personnel are, some are more experienced than the others. Some are, more adept to fixing some problems or solutions or anything like that. Having a sort of a smaller group of, well-experienced or, field supervisor guys going around to different rigs to being at the job makes sense. And having, office guys basically doing, the watching, the logging, the data interpretation stuff.
Yep. So, I know it's not any one thing that makes or breaks a company, right? And a lot of people tend to like look for that one thing, and usually success is a whole lot of things coming together, right? But like, what do you think as a service company is just the most critical thing, right, that you have to get right? Is it the people and their training? Is it the processes and how you service the tools? Is it the salespeople who get all the jobs? What is the most critical in your mind as far as overall success for a service company, or maybe even like a ranking of like, what do you think the highest priorities are?
Well, I mean, I'm a little biased on what I think is, the most important stuff, being a shop and lab kind of guy, but I think everyone's super important in it. Sales team, operations team, servicing team, everything like that is super important. And, our reputation at Total is, consistency, innovation. We got tons of great experience and quality guys there. So for me, I don't think there's one thing that's, most important in a service industry. Everything has to work together.
No, and that's really true, right? Like, I this is kind of probably a silly and tired analogy, but like I've really started to think about a company as kind of an engine, right? And so, I mean, sales, operations, manufacturing, HR, everything has to succeed together or everything breaks, right? Like you'll never overcome, a poor sales organization with an outstanding operations organization, right? Or vice versa, or whatever else. Like you really can't drop anything. Like it's all got to be working together, and it's all going to be working well. And any one of those categories starts to suffer, and the whole company suffers as a result. Like there's just no way to overcome one category being deficient by overcompensating in another, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what do you think one of the biggest insights that you've kind of, gathered in your career as far as, the service, being on the service side, the 24/7 side, what's been one of the more interesting things that you've kind of learned over the years?
I guess the most, I don't know if it's very interesting, but one of the most important things I learned is, like we talked about earlier, is you have to adapt and, you have to learn from any sort of issues that went on in the past. You can't repeat them. You try not to repeat them. You just want to, move forward. And to me, learning all the time about new stuff is, what's the exciting part about the industry is nothing's the same. Even though it's, a little bit redundant, there's never anything that's going to be exactly the same. You're not going to see the exact same incident. You're not going to see the same failures go down on certain tools every time. Everything's going to be a little different.
Well, and it's also interesting is like all the technology is constantly getting better in every direction. Bits get better, motors get better, MWD gets better, mud pumps get better, rigs get better, right? And so there's no constant, right? Like nothing's the same as it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or whatever, because all these different things that we interact with are changing all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And you
Exactly.
mentioned custom technology. Have you found that your in-house technology development has given you a competitive advantage, or has it increased reliability, or what kind of focus is there?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's definitely increased reliability in certain aspects of it. I mean, we have to work with a lot of providers and, companies like yourselves to, improve what we want to sell. And the service is what we're selling. Some of our, for instance, we have the Enigma system that is, some filters and stuff like that for decoding. And, we have the new Titan tool out, and that's, a real-time telemetry communication with the Orbit tool. And, for us, it's, kind of been a game changer is, what we're able to see, what we're able to do, what we're able to provide to the customer. So,
Mhm.
We can't rely always on, other companies to do it for us. Sometimes you got to do it yourself. So,
Yeah.
No, that's great. Brad, what do you think the most important thing for like everyone to work on as an industry is in the next few years?
I mean, I don't think we need to get, well, no one's going to get complacent, but, moving to faster drilling speed, hotter temperature, everything like that, everything is becoming tougher on the service companies, I guess, and development companies with technology because everyone wants to get faster, better, hotter. So learning that, gearing up for the future, improving techniques and technology is what everyone is trying to do, is what everyone needs to do. We want to make it as best as.
Oh crap, that's annoying. Dave, do you have any more questions or anything else to keep us going?
Well, I think one of the things that I've thought about, and we've discussed internally, is how MWD service companies, the MWD tools, it's all at the end of the day data. I mean, it's weird. MWD service companies are data companies. You're delivering data to your customers, and it's just the interesting paradigm shift when entering the industry initially. It's like, oh, we're doing designing hardware that does stuff, when really that's secondary to delivering the data to the end user to allow them to steer and drill their wells.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have mountains and mountains of data. Processing it, getting through it, and interpreting it is, one of the biggest hurdles that we find. We can gather all the data. We have, signal filters and transducers and everything else. We're getting accelerometers and magnetometers and everything. We're gathering the data.
Yeah.
Put it to good use is, a different story. So
that's always the big challenge, right? It's like, okay, I worked really hard to design this system, and now I've got all this data coming in, and you go, now what? It's like it's just surprising because you think all the work is in designing the system to get you the data, and it's not. There's a whole other part on using all the data that you produce, right? And but I'm right with you on Brad as far as like the technology roadmap. I think we need to drill more efficiently. We need to go, after more resources, get hotter. I am all about, U.S. and Canada drilling and North American energy independence. And, we have made some crazy gains. Like there's been so many man hours in this industry that have been put into, I'm talking tens of millions of man hours or more, right? It's been put into making every part of the drilling process. Everybody's working on bits and motors and MWD and agitators and drill pipe and connections and rig systems and mud pumps and automatic drillers and automation and cloud KPI systems and all this kind of stuff. And we have made such a massive impact in our ability to produce energy. If you look at it like on a per rig basis, like the amount of footage that a rig today can drill compared to 10 years ago, and the amount of quote unquote barrels that it can access and produce, like the amount of oil that we produce as a continent or as a country, compared to the rig count, like we're producing more oil all the time. And I feel like we have this, huge duty to continue pushing that forward. And I'm just so excited for the future because, I really think we're just getting started. There's so many things that we can dream that these rigs can do that we're just getting started.
Yeah, totally. Completely agree. It's pretty crazy out there.
It is crazy out there. Well, Brad, is there anything else you want to add, or are you okay if we go ahead and wrap up?
No, we can wrap.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks, Brad, for joining us on today's show. Be sure to check out our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.